Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story.
Subscribe, like, and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
He leaned in with that smug half-smile he wore like a badge of honor, his breath still carrying the sour mix of morning coffee and Marlboros, and said it just loud enough for me to hear. Too bad it's just community college, huh? I didn't look at him when he said it. I didn't flinch, didn't sigh, didn't even blink. I had trained myself not to anymore, like a soldier numbed by the 100th wound. He'd been doing this for years, slicing little pieces off my pride and tossing them over his shoulder like scraps, like I wasn't supposed to notice. The sun was beating down on the plastic chairs and folding stage platform like we were at a backyard barbecue and not a graduation ceremony. Everyone else had balloons and flowers, some even wore customized t-shirts with their kids' faces on them. My mom sat beside me, quiet and proud, hands fidgeting with the hem of her cardigan like she was holding back an ocean of emotion. My dad, meanwhile, slouched in his seat, arms crossed, sunglasses on like he was trying to make it obvious this wasn't worth his time. I remember thinking, you could have just stayed home, man. But of course, he came. He always showed up when there was a chance to remind me I hadn't done enough. So I sat there in that scratchy blue robe, the plastic cap itching the back of my neck, staring at the stage and waiting for the moment. The moment I'd played over in my head for the past year, over and over, like a scene from a movie I wasn't sure anyone would ever watch. When the dean of academics walked up to the mic and cleared her throat, the crowd got quiet fast. She was one of the few people at that school who'd ever looked me in the eyes like I mattered. Her voice had that mix of confidence and warmth, like she knew something no one else did. And she did. "We have a surprise today," she said, smiling as the breeze picked up and rustled her notes. "One of our graduates is not only finishing with top academic honors, but has also been awarded a full academic scholarship to continue his studies at one of the most prestigious universities in the country." People murmured. My mom leaned forward in her chair, like her body already knew before her mind caught up. "That student," the dean continued, locking eyes with me across the crowd, "is Jason Hartley. And the university is Harvard." I swear to God, it was like the earth stopped spinning for a second. The applause started slow, like people were trying to process what she'd just said. Then it picked up, louder and louder, until it felt like the whole place was shaking. My mom's hands flew to her face, and she started crying the way you cry when something you never thought would happen finally does. A couple of people around us stood and clapped harder. And my dad, that smug, sarcastic, never proud of anyone man, went pale like a ghost. The color drained out of his face so fast I thought he was gonna pass out. He took off his sunglasses, and for the first time in my life, he looked at me like he didn't know who the hell I was. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I didn't even stand up until I had to walk the stage. When they handed me my diploma and shook my hand, I just nodded, because that was the moment I'd been waiting for, not the scholarship, not the applause, but his face. That moment when he realized I wasn't the loser he'd convinced himself I was. I wasn't the failure, the burden, the waste of potential. I was the kid who made it, and he never saw it coming. Have you ever had someone so close to you, someone who should have believed in you more than anyone else, make you feel like you'd never be enough? What would you do if, one day, you proved them wrong? People came up after the ceremony. Teachers, classmates, even the principal. They shook my hand, told me I deserved it, asked me what I was going to study. I told them I hadn't decided yet, which was true. I'd been so focused on getting out I hadn't thought much about what came after. My mom clung to me like she was afraid I'd disappear. Her mascara was running, but she was smiling in that big, messy, joyful way only moms can. She whispered, "I always knew you were going places." And maybe she did. Or maybe she just needed to believe it harder than anyone. My dad? He said nothing, just stood there, arms hanging at his sides, eyes darting around like someone was gonna explain this magic trick to him any minute. Like he was waiting for the reveal that it was all a prank. Eventually, He mumbled something like, "Didn't know you were even applying to that place," and that was it. "No, I'm proud of you." No hug. Not even a handshake. So I left. I didn't stick around for photos or dinner or any of that. I didn't want to ruin the high with another one of his moods. I walked the half-mile back to my beat-up Honda and drove home with the windows down and the music up, trying to feel something more than just numb relief. Later that night, as I sat on the roof of our house with a beer I probably wasn't supposed to have and the Harvard folder in my lap, my phone buzzed. It was a text. From him. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." He was the kind of man who believed in calloused hands and empty praise, who thought emotions were for cowards and compliments were just invitations for weakness. Doug Hartley was born in the mid-60s, back when the only way a man showed he cared was by giving you shit when you didn't do something right. He grew up in a town where men were judged by how many hours they could work before their backs gave out and how few words they could say without coming off soft. To Doug, a man didn't say, "I love you," he said, "You can do better," and expected you to understand the sentiment beneath the sting. And if you didn't understand, well, that was your damn fault, not his. He never hit me. Not once. I'll give him that. But the silence between us felt like getting smacked upside the head every single day. And when he did speak, the words were sharp, like he'd been sharpening them in his mouth all morning. I remember asking him for help with math in the 4th grade. I had a stutter back then, real bad, especially when I was nervous. I could barely get the question out before he snapped, "Spit it out already, damn it," and turned back to the game like I wasn't even there. After that, I stopped asking. School wasn't easy for me. I wasn't dumb, but numbers danced around in my head like they were trying to mess with me. I'd mix them up, flip them sideways, add when I should subtract. Teachers said it was probably dyscalculia, but Doug didn't believe in that kind of thing. Said it was just an excuse for lazy kids who didn't want to work hard. When I was your age, he'd say, we didn't need some fancy label. We just figured it the hell out. That was the end of it. No testing, no tutoring. Just more yelling, more silence, and more of me thinking maybe I really was just dumb. I wasn't into sports either, which was its own kind of sin in our house. Doug had played linebacker in high school and still had his old helmet hanging in the garage like some sacred relic. He'd wanted me to try out for football the second I hit puberty, but I was small and bookish and terrified of getting hit. I remember one summer he bought me cleats and a practice jersey and said, "Time to toughen you up." I wore them once to make him happy and got a bloody nose during the first scrimmage. He never said it directly, but the look he gave me afterward, that mix of disappointment and disgust, burned deeper than anything he could have said. So I started disappearing. Not literally, but in the ways that mattered. I spent lunch hours in the school library, buried in books about space, history, psychology, anything that made me feel like there was a world outside our small town and our even smaller house. I memorized facts like they were spells. I read biographies like they were instruction manuals. I started writing papers for other kids just to prove to myself I was smart, even if nobody at home believed it. One afternoon, in my junior year of high school, I stayed after class to talk to my English teacher, Mrs. Kemp. She was one of the only people who ever said I had potential without making it sound like a curse. I asked her about college, not because I thought I could get in, but because I needed to hear someone say it wasn't impossible. She smiled and said, "You'd be surprised how far you can go if you just try." That night, I filled out an application to community college. I didn't tell anyone. I used the school computers, filled in every field like my life depended on it, and mailed it off with money I'd saved from mowing lawns and tutoring middle schoolers. I didn't have a plan exactly, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I didn't even want to go far. I just wanted out from under the weight of Doug's disappointment, out from under that roof where every breath felt like a test I was failing. Weeks passed, then months, and I kept my secret. I'd practice my interview answers in the mirror late at night, whispering them so no one would hear. I started sleeping less, thinking more. Every day felt like walking across a frozen lake, hoping it wouldn't crack. Then one afternoon in April, I came home from school and there was a fat envelope on the kitchen table with my name on it. I froze. I hadn't told anyone I'd applied, which meant someone must have found the mailbox before me. My mom looked at me funny when I picked it up, like she wasn't sure if she should be proud or concerned. Doug wasn't home yet. I opened it in my room with shaking hands. Inside was an acceptance letter, some pamphlets, and a welcome note that ended with the words, "We look forward to helping you build your future." I just sat there for a while, staring at that line like it was written in gold. Then I tucked everything back inside and slid the envelope under my mattress. That night at dinner, I didn't say a word. Doug talked about some guy at work who screwed up an oil change, and my mom nodded politely like she always did. When I finally pulled the envelope out 2 days later and handed it to them, Doug didn't even finish reading it before snorting. "Community college, huh?" he said, like I'd just told him I got a coupon for half-off burgers. Guess even idiots get in these days. My mom tried to smile, tried to say something nice, but the air was already poisoned. I could feel the disappointment rolling off Doug like heat from a furnace. But I didn't flinch. I didn't bite my lip or look down. I just nodded, folded the letter back up, and said, "Yeah." Something like that. Because what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already started working on something bigger. And the best part was, he wouldn't see it coming. Community college wasn't a fallback for me, it was escape in slow motion, a chance to breathe somewhere no one expected much, and I could finally start building the version of myself I kept hidden for too long. The kind of place where people didn't ask what your last name meant in town, didn't care what your father did for a living, didn't weigh your worth by the jersey you wore or the car you drove. It was quiet, almost too quiet sometimes, but that silence gave me room to think, to plan, to work. And work I did. I picked up shifts at a gas station on the edge of town, the kind of place where you sold smokes to guys who called you bud and champ but didn't tip, and you spent the midnight hours wiping down counters and reading textbooks under flickering fluorescent lights. My boss, Joe, was a decent guy with a busted back and a bitter sense of humor, and he didn't ask too many questions as long as the till matched at the end of the night. That job kept my tank full, paid for secondhand books, and gave me something even more valuable, time to think without Doug breathing down my neck, questioning every decision like it was a crime. During the day, I was in class or holed up in the library, working on essays, finishing assignments early, trying to prove, if only to myself, that I was more than what my father thought I'd be. I didn't hang out with people much, didn't date, didn't party. It wasn't that I didn't want to, it just felt like a distraction I couldn't afford. While others were figuring out who they were, I was building who I needed to be, brick by brick, under the radar. I joined the honors program in my second semester. Nobody knew how or why. I hadn't told a soul I'd applied. I just showed up one day in the back of the classroom and made sure I stayed out of the way while quietly climbing to the top of the pile. I volunteered at the local shelter on weekends, wrote speeches for campus events, and submitted essays to competitions I never told anyone about. I didn't need applause or recognition. What I needed was distance, distance between the version of me Doug saw and the one I knew I could become. And while all that was happening, I started casting lines into the void, applying to every scholarship I could find. Not the obvious ones. Not the ones where they wanted some perfect sob story wrapped in a bow. I looked for the overlooked ones, the obscure private foundations, the weird essay prompts, the ones buried 5 pages deep into search results. 20 in total. I applied at night, when the station was slow, writing drafts on receipt paper or typing them up on the ancient PC behind the counter while the security camera blinked like it was watching me hustle. Most of them I never heard back from. Except one. It was March when I got the email. I remember the way my breath caught in my chest as I read the subject line 3 times, just to be sure it said what I thought it did. Congratulations, full academic scholarship award. I clicked it open and saw the name at the top, Harvard University. Not a scam. Not a prank. The real thing. Tuition, housing, meals, books, all of it covered. My fingers shook on the mouse as I reread the words over and over, like they might disappear if I blinked too hard. And I told no one. Not even my mom, who'd always been the softer voice in my life, the one person who never outright said she believed in me, but sometimes let it show in the way she packed my lunch or quietly left $10 on my desk when she knew gas money was tight. I didn't tell her. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed to feel it, own it, without anyone else's shadow cast across the moment. This was mine. After years of Doug's condescending looks, his muttered insults, his belief that I was nothing more than a screw-up with soft hands and bad genes, I needed this moment to hit like thunder. Weeks passed, and I kept it inside like a secret flame, flickering steady in my chest. I smiled more. I studied harder. I even let myself imagine what it would feel like to walk across that cheap folding stage, accept my diploma, and watch Doug's face as he heard the name Harvard in the same sentence as Jason Hartley. I imagined that moment so many times, it started to feel like a drug. It wasn't just about proving him wrong anymore, it was about reclaiming every time he made me feel small, stupid, or invisible. Then came the meeting with the dean. I was told to come to her office a week before graduation, and I remember sitting there in that hard plastic chair while she smiled at me like I was someone who finally mattered. "We'd like to surprise the audience during the ceremony," she said, folding her hands gently like she was about to hand me a sacred truth. "Announce the scholarship publicly during the speeches. It'll be good for the college, good for the students to see what's possible." I nodded slowly, heart pounding. I pretended to think it over, like it wasn't already burned into my bones. I said it sounded fine. Truth was, it sounded perfect. That night, I stood in the back lot of the gas station, watching the highway disappear into the dark, my name still echoing in my head next to the word Harvard. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like I won something. But all I could think was, when I see his face, will it feel sweet, or will it just feel sad? Because the deeper truth was, I didn't want revenge. I wanted him to care. And part of me feared he never would. The house was still when I got back, the kind of silence that feels planned, like the walls were in on a secret they weren't about to share. My mom had fallen asleep on the couch, still wearing the cardigan she cried into earlier, her makeup smudged into little tracks on her cheeks. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a minute, wondering how much she actually knew and how much she pretended not to. She always tried to play peacemaker, tried to smooth the cracks over like she believed silence was the same as healing, but even silence has a weight if you carry it long enough. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket, sharp and sudden like it was trying to startle me out of that moment. I pulled it out, saw the name on the screen, Dad, and that alone made my stomach twist. He never texted, never called unless something was broken or someone was late. Just 3 words lit up the screen. Come to garage. There was no question mark, no punctuation, no context. Just an order. Like always. I thought about ignoring it, thought about pretending I hadn't seen it until morning, but something about the way he sent it, flat, abrupt, out of nowhere, told me he was drinking. And when Doug Hartley drank, sometimes the truth came out in little slips, like oil leaking from a cracked engine. Maybe it was stupid, but I wanted to see what version of him I was going to get that night. The garage was dimly lit, the same old single bulb swinging on its chain in the center, casting shadows across the workbench and shelves cluttered with half-finished projects and tools that hadn't been used in years. He was sitting on the stool by the bench, hunched forward, one booted foot tapping a slow rhythm on the concrete floor. There was an open bottle of wild turkey in front of him, almost half gone, and a second glass poured, but untouched, like he'd planned this as some kind of ritual. He didn't look at me when I walked in, just stared at the glass in front of him like it might say something he couldn't. I waited, arms crossed, back against the garage door, ready for him to take a swing, verbally, emotionally, whatever version of damage he had in mind tonight. Instead, he said, "You remind me of her." That caught me off guard. My throat went dry before I could ask who he meant, and he kept talking like he hadn't even noticed I was there. "Not your mother," he said, and then corrected himself. "Well, not the one you call your mother." The silence that followed was long enough to stretch across years. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the settling of the foundation, the creak of the rafters. I waited because something in his voice said this wasn't just drunk talk. It was something older, heavier. "There was a girl once," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "Before all this. Before I got stuck in this life. Her name was Rachel. She was smart. Way smarter than me. Beautiful, but not in the way that makes guys stare, more like the kind that makes you forget how to speak when she looks at you." He paused to take a drink, wincing as it burned down. I still hadn't moved. "She wanted out," he said. "Of this town. Of everything. She had plans. Big ones. Said she was gonna be a lawyer, maybe a professor. Wanted to go to Yale or Stanford, I forget which." He laughed then, a dry, bitter sound that didn't have any humor in it. "I knocked her up." That hit like a slap. My chest tightened, and I suddenly felt cold in the warm air. "She was scared," he said, "but she wanted to keep it. Said she'd make it work somehow." I didn't handle it well. I was 21, working in my old man's shop, drinking too much, angry at everything. I told her we couldn't afford it. That it would ruin both our lives. That we were too young. He didn't look at me when he said it, just stared at the bottle like it was the only thing willing to forgive him. She left town. Didn't tell me where she went. Didn't call. I figured that was it, and I let her go because I was a coward. I didn't chase her. Didn't try. Another drink. Few years later, your mom shows up. Says she met a kid at a clinic downtown. Said the mom was gone, complications after birth. Said the dad was nowhere to be found, and she couldn't have kids of her own. He looked at me then, and there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before, regret, maybe, or something uglier. She said the baby looked like me. Had my eyes. My jawline. Same birthmark on the back of the shoulder. She didn't ask questions. Just brought you home. I didn't say anything. Couldn't, really. My knees were locked, mouth dry, heart thudding like it wanted to escape my chest. I figured it was fate, he said. Or punishment. Or both. He stood up slowly, joints creaking, walked past me toward the corner of the garage, and pulled something off the top shelf. It was an old wooden box, the kind people keep letters in or jewelry they don't wear anymore. He opened it and handed me a photo. The edges were curled, the colors faded, but the face staring back at me hit like a truck. Same eyes. Same nose. Same half-crooked smile. The woman in the photo looked so much like me it made my stomach twist. She was going to change the world, he said softly. You still can. Then, as he turned back toward the bench and poured himself another drink, he muttered under his breath, You're not me, kid. Maybe that's the best thing about you. I walked out without saying a word, the photo clutched in my hand, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't angry, I was just lost. The photo stayed in my hand long after I'd gone back inside, long after the garage door creaked shut behind me and the stale whiskey smell still clung to my shirt like a memory I couldn't wash off. I sat on my bed with the old wooden box next to me, the weight of it far heavier than the dusty would should have allowed. My legs were stiff, my mind spinning in too many directions at once. I didn't know if what I'd heard was the truth or some twisted version of it cooked up by a drunk man trying to make peace with the wreckage he'd created, but the photo made it hard to doubt. That woman in the picture wasn't just familiar, she was me, in a different time, a different world. She was proof. And suddenly, the past didn't feel like history anymore, it felt like a lie I'd been living inside for 20 years. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I stared at the ceiling, at the shadowy patterns the streetlight painted through the blinds, at the corners of the room where I used to imagine monsters as a kid. Turns out, the real monster was always just sitting at the dinner table, eating quietly, watching the news, building resentment with every breath I took. At some point, when the sun started to creep up and turn the walls a dull orange, I got out of bed, padded down the hall barefoot, and stood in front of my parents' bedroom door. I hesitated, hand raised, unsure whether I was about to blow up my entire life or finally learn why it had always felt like I didn't quite belong inside it. Then I knocked, once, firm and loud. I heard rustling, the creak of bedsheets, and then her voice, tired, groggy, still half lost in sleep, saying, "Jason, what is it?" I opened the door without waiting for permission. She was sitting up, the lamp casting a soft glow across her face, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the lines around her eyes, the weight in her shoulders, the years she'd worn quietly without ever asking for anything back. "Who is this?" I asked, holding the photo up, my hand shaking slightly even though I was trying like hell to stay calm. She squinted at it, then froze. Her mouth parted like she was about to say something but couldn't find the words. That silence told me more than anything else could have. "Don't lie to me," I said louder now, the dam cracking. "Just tell me the truth. Who is she?" She took the photo from me slowly, her fingers trembling, and stared at it for what felt like forever. Then, in a voice so soft I barely heard it, she said, her name was Rachel. That name landed like a hammer. Doug's voice echoed in my mind from the night before, and suddenly, all the pieces started to fall into place, jagged and cruel and uninvited. "She was your mother," my mom said. Or the woman I had always called my mom. "Your real mother." I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, heart pounding, a knot forming in my throat that I couldn't swallow past. "She died," she said, tears already forming at the edges of her eyes. "After you were born. There were complications. She didn't make it through the night." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just looked at her, waiting, daring her to keep going. Doug, he was never the same after that. He shut down. He wouldn't hold you, wouldn't look at you for weeks. I think she stopped herself, pressing a hand to her mouth, swallowing hard. "I think he blamed you." That was it. That was the sharp, poisonous root buried beneath every sarcastic comment, every dismissive look, every time he'd called me useless or soft or too damn smart for my own good. He didn't hate me because of who I was, he hated me because I lived. Because I was the one who made it out of that hospital, crying and flailing and innocent, while the woman he actually loved disappeared into the white walls forever. I felt sick, like I was going to throw up right there on the bedroom carpet. "He married me 2 years later," she said quietly, eyes down. "I loved him. I did. And I loved you from the moment I held you. But he never let go of her. Not really. He never forgave you. Or himself." I stood up. I couldn't stay in that room another second. The walls were closing in and everything I'd ever known felt like it had a crack running straight down the middle. I walked back to my room, shut the door, and stared at my desk where the Harvard envelope sat, still unopened since the ceremony. The one with the confirmation forms inside. The one I'd been planning to send off in the next day or two. I picked it up, hands cold, and peeled it open slowly. The words were warm, congratulatory, promising a future I hadn't believed was real until that very moment. I read through the packet like someone reading a will, each paragraph filled with possibility and pressure. At the bottom was the deadline. 5 days. That's how long I had to decide. 5 days to say yes to everything I had worked for, everything I'd built in the shadows of Doug's indifference and silence. But now I knew the silence had a reason, and somehow that made it even worse. I sat back in the chair, envelope in my lap, photo of Rachel still pressed between my fingers, and tried to imagine a world where I could just leave. Where I could walk away from the wreckage and become something else. But a part of me suddenly didn't want to, because how do you walk away from a fire you just learned you were born inside of? The air was thick with August heat, the kind that sticks to your skin and seeps into your bones before the sun's even fully up. And I was standing in the driveway stuffing a duffel bag into the rusted backseat of my truck like it might burst into flames if I didn't leave soon. The Harvard forms were signed and sealed, sitting in the glove compartment like a promise I wasn't entirely convinced I deserved to keep. I had 4 days until move-in and no plan beyond driving somewhere, anywhere, just to feel the road underneath me and silence between me and everything that had been said and not said over the past few weeks. I hadn't told anyone I was going. Not my mom, not the few friends I still texted from community college, and definitely not Doug. I figured he wouldn't care anyway, or worse, he'd see it as another example of me running from something, just like he always said I did. But as I bent over to tie down the secondhand cooler in the bed of the truck, I heard his boots crunch across the gravel, slow and deliberate, like he'd been waiting for the right moment to interrupt me. I didn't even turn around at first, just kept messing with the bungee cords, hoping maybe he'd get the hint and disappear back into the house or whatever dark corner he liked to sit and drink in these days. But he didn't leave. Instead, he stopped a few feet behind me and said, "One last ride, just us?" I froze. The words landed with that weird weight his rare moments of clarity always carried, and for a second I thought maybe I'd imagined it, that maybe it was something I wanted to hear him say, and my brain just made it real. I turned around slowly, eyes narrowing against the morning sun, and sure enough, there he was, shirt half-buttoned, face unshaven, but sober, or at least sober enough. "Just you and me?" I asked, squinting. "Why?" He shrugged, scratched the back of his neck like a teenager about to ask out his crush. "Thought maybe we should talk. Or at least try. Before you go." Everything inside me wanted to say no. Every memory of his voice rising in judgment, every sideways comment, every birthday where he barely looked up from the TV, all of it screamed, "Don't let him in the truck." But some smaller, quieter part of me, the part that still wondered who I really was and where I really came from, said yes before I could stop it. The road stretched out in front of us like it had something to prove. We didn't talk much at first. The engine groaned under the summer heat, the windows were rolled down, and the only sound was the rush of air and the occasional rattle from something loose under the dashboard. Doug sat in the passenger seat like he was trying to disappear into it, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the horizon. He didn't criticize my driving, didn't comment on the dust, didn't say a damn thing for at least an hour, and I'll admit, it felt almost peaceful. Eventually, the silence cracked. "You were a quiet kid," he said, out of nowhere. "Always had your nose in a book. Never liked noise." I gripped the wheel tighter, jaw clenched. "Wonder where I got that from." He chuckled, dry and humorless. "Fair." More silence. Miles of it. Trees blurred by, small towns flickered past, forgotten exits leading to places I'd never visit again. We stopped for gas at a station with flickering lights and vending machines from the 90s. He didn't follow me inside. Just leaned against the hood, looking like he was trying to solve a puzzle with no pieces. Back on the road, he finally said, "I did everything wrong with you." I didn't say anything, just kept driving. "Doesn't mean I didn't love you," he added, quieter this time. "I just didn't know how to show it. Still don't." I wanted to laugh, but it stuck in my throat. I wanted to scream, but it felt too late. So I just asked, "Then why didn't you try sooner?" He looked out the window for a long time before answering. "Because every time I looked at you, I saw her." And there it was again, Rachel. The ghost neither of us could outrun, the woman who somehow lived in my cheekbones and voice, and maybe even my laugh, though I wasn't sure I'd ever really laughed around him enough for him to know. I felt hollow hearing it again, and full of something I couldn't name at the same time. I didn't want to be a reflection of someone lost. I wanted to be seen as someone here, someone present, someone real. We pulled off the highway around dusk into a cracked pavement lot beside an old roadside diner that looked like it had been built in the 50s and hadn't been cleaned since. The neon sign buzzed overhead, barely clinging to life. I figured we'd eat something greasy, maybe get back on the road and try not to talk again. But when we walked in, a bell jingling over the door, the air smelling like burnt coffee and fried onions, a woman behind the counter looked up and froze. Her eyes locked on Doug like she'd seen a ghost crawl out of a memory she'd tried to bury. "You're the guy who walked out on her," she said, not loud, but with enough venom to stop my heartbeat for a moment. "Rachel, you left her right before she got sick." Doug stiffened. His whole face changed, not in surprise, but in shame, maybe even recognition. The woman stepped out from behind the counter, maybe in her late 50s now, with tired eyes and a dish rag in one hand like she might throw it at him out of instinct. "I was her sister," she said, staring at him like she wanted to peel his skin back with her words. "I saw what you did, what you didn't do, and then you just disappeared." I turned to look at him, and in that second, the man I thought I hated shrank into someone smaller, someone pathetic, someone who had been running from something so much bigger than I'd ever imagined. The silence between us in that moment was louder than any scream could have been. And I knew then that the past wasn't dead. It was sitting in that diner with us. And it still had teeth. The silence in the diner had that thick, heavy quality to it, like someone had sucked all the air out of the room and replaced it with something dense and unspoken. Doug stood there frozen, like he'd just taken a punch he hadn't seen coming, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his face that wasn't just frustration or tiredness or judgment. It was shame, and it cut deeper than I expected it to. The woman behind the counter didn't blink, didn't back off, didn't care that I was standing there watching the last of the illusion I'd carried about my father crack and crumble like dried-up paint on a wall too long ignored. "She wrote letters," the woman said, her voice shaking with old anger, old sorrow. "Before she died. You never answered any of them. You knew she was sick and you just, what? Moved on? Found someone easier? Someone who wouldn't ask you to be a man for once in your life." Doug didn't say anything. He just stood there, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the floor like it might forgive him if he stared hard enough. I looked at him then, really looked at him, not as a father, not as the man who raised me, but as someone I didn't really know at all. The man I'd been trying to impress for 20 years suddenly looked so small, so damn broken, I felt something inside me twist and snap. "I think you should go," she said, and this time her voice didn't shake. Doug finally looked up and gave a single nod, then turned and walked past me toward the door, not saying a word. I stood there for a second, caught between staying and following him, my heart pounding like it was trying to drag my ribs apart. Then I followed, because there was too much unsaid, too much rotting in the spaces between us. Back at the truck, he sat on the passenger side, shoulders slumped, hands limp in his lap like they didn't belong to him anymore. I got in behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. The dusk was bleeding into full dark, the diner sign flickering weakly behind us, casting flashes of red and white across the dashboard. He spoke first. "She knew," he said, voice hoarse like it had been sandpapered raw. "Rachel. She knew about the other woman." I didn't say anything, just stared straight ahead at the cracked windshield, trying to keep the rage buried under my skin from boiling over. "It was just once," he went on, like that changed anything. "Some dumb, angry mistake. I thought she'd never find out. But she did. She always saw through people, even when she didn't want to." He rubbed his face with both hands like he was trying to scrub the memory off. "That night," he said slowly, "the night she went into labor, we fought. Hard. She was already feeling sick, scared, and I said some things I can't take back. Things about not being ready. About how maybe we should have waited. Maybe I wasn't cut out for any of it." She left the room crying. Next thing I knew, she was being rushed into surgery. I finally turned to him, every muscle in my body tense like I'd been wired with electricity. "So you blamed me." His lips parted like he was going to deny it, but he didn't. "I blamed myself," he said. "But I couldn't live with that. So, yeah, I took it out on you. You were the one who survived. You were the living proof of how bad I screwed it all up. Every time I looked at you, it was like looking at her and hearing her last words again." I stared at him for a long, dangerous second, heart pounding in my ears, and then I exploded. "You let me grow up thinking I was the mistake? My voice was loud, raw, unfiltered now. You buried her with your guilt and dumped the rest on me like it was my job to carry it around for the rest of my life? Doug winced, but didn't answer. You could have told me, I continued, voice trembling. You could have said anything. A damn sorry would have been a start. But no, you gave me silence, sarcasm, every little jab like it was a favor. You taught me how to hate myself in the same breath you drank your breakfast with. He looked like he'd been punched. And then, for the first time in my entire life, I saw it happen. He cried. Not the kind of crying you see in movies. Not loud or poetic. Just quiet tears slipping down his face, almost embarrassed to be there, like he couldn't control the leak and didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to be anything else, he whispered. I thought if I stayed cold, I couldn't get hurt again. But I hurt you instead. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. My throat was too tight, and my mind was already gone, already burning rubber down some imaginary road where none of this had happened. So I started the engine. He didn't try to stop me when I pulled out of the lot. He didn't ask where I was going, didn't plead or beg or offer some half-assed apology in exchange for another chance. He just sat there as I pulled onto the highway, then watched through the side mirror as I left him behind at that diner like a ghost that couldn't follow. The road stretched out ahead of me again, dark now, lit only by the weak headlights and the humming glow of passing mile markers. The letter from Harvard sat on the passenger seat where he'd been, still sealed in its envelope like a question I hadn't dared to answer. And next to it, tucked into the sun visor, was the photo of Rachel, the woman I'd never know, the face I wore like a borrowed legacy, the maybe life that could have been mine if things had been different. I didn't know where I was driving. I just knew I couldn't turn back. The sky was overcast that morning, the kind of gray that sits heavy over everything and makes the whole world feel like it's holding its breath, and maybe that was fitting, because I wasn't sure if I was breathing either as I pulled into the parking lot at Harvard. My truck looked like it belonged in another universe, sandwiched between Teslas and SUVs that probably cost more than most houses in my hometown, and for a second I just sat there gripping the wheel, wondering if maybe someone would come out and tell me there'd been a mistake, that this place wasn't meant for someone like me, someone patched together with guilt, rage, and secondhand dreams. Nobody came. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even noticed me as I stepped out into the morning chill, the envelope in my hand, the duffel over my shoulder, the weight of the last 20 years pressing into the center of my chest like it had all decided to hitch a ride one last time. I hadn't told Doug I was going. I hadn't called my mom to say goodbye. I hadn't responded to the 2 texts still sitting unanswered on my phone, one from him, just a single sentence asking, "You okay?" and one from her, saying she hoped I'd find what I was looking for. The truth was, I didn't know if I was okay, and I didn't know what I was looking for. All I knew was that I had made it here, to this place that had always felt like a myth, something meant for other people, better people, people who hadn't been raised in a house where silence screamed louder than any argument and love was rationed like wartime sugar. I carried my bags up 2 flights of stairs to a room that smelled like fresh paint and stale nerves, the kind of place that looked like possibility and panic all rolled into one. My roommate wasn't there yet, which felt like a small mercy because I needed space to breathe before pretending to be normal around someone who probably hadn't spent the summer piecing together the truth about a dead mother and a broken father. I unpacked slowly, not because there was a lot, but because each item felt like it came with a question attached. The worn notebook I'd used to scribble scholarship essay drafts during gas station night shifts. The photo of Rachel, tucked carefully between the pages of an old novel I never finished reading. A small, dented alarm clock that had once belonged to Doug, though I wasn't sure why I brought it. Maybe I just needed something ugly and familiar, something that reminded me of what I'd survived. An hour later, the door opened and a tall, nervous-looking guy stepped in, all wide smiles and jittery energy. He introduced himself, Ben from Chicago, majoring in economics, and I gave him the friendliest version of myself I could manage, even though my stomach was still in knots and my heart felt like a fist wrapped too tight. He asked me where I was from, and I told him the truth. Small town. Nothing special. He nodded like he understood, but I could tell he didn't. Not really, and maybe that was okay. Maybe I didn't want to be understood just yet. After he left to go meet some people down the hall, I sat on my bed and stared at the envelope again, the one I'd almost burned in a gas station trash can 2 weeks ago. The Harvard welcome packet. The golden ticket. The thing that had once felt like a weapon, something I could use to finally prove that I wasn't worthless, that I was more than the angry boy my father couldn't look at without remembering the worst night of his life. I pulled out a sheet of paper and a pen, sat at the tiny desk under the window, and stared at the blank page for a long time before I finally started writing. Not to Harvard. Not to myself. But to him. I didn't write Dear Dad because the words still tasted sour in my mouth. I didn't write I forgive you because forgiveness isn't a magic spell. It's a wound you let scab over and hope doesn't rip open again the next time something brushes up against it the wrong way. Instead, I wrote, "You were wrong about me, but I hope you find a way to stop being wrong about yourself." That was all. No more. I folded it once, slid it into an envelope, and left it sitting on the desk. Not sure if I'd ever send it, not sure if it mattered. But something about writing it down made the room feel a little less heavy, like maybe the past wasn't something I had to carry on my shoulders every step forward. I stood up, walked over to the closet, and pulled out a small tack from the welcome kit. Then I reached into my bag, found the photo of Rachel, and pinned it to the wall above my desk. Her eyes met mine, frozen in time, and for the first time since the truth came crashing down, I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I turned to the mirror, half expecting to see Doug staring back at me like he always had. But this time, he wasn't there. Just me. Just Jason. Was I right to leave it all behind? Or did I just trade one kind of pain for another? You tell me.